What is up, Oak Life Familia? It is Chris and Craig back at it again. And today we are continuing the conversation and processing the attack on the Capitol.
Yeah, look, I get crazy when the mic round. No sense of getting hyped now. But I'm...
Hey, Chris, good to see your face again, homie.
Yo, what's up?
Yo, nothing, just chilling. Got my water, got my snacks. I'm ready to have this conversation. It has been, it's been a doozy these past couple weeks, this past week specifically, and I think all the opportunities we have to converse and understand and be together are necessary. So I'm curious to kind of hear your thoughts and your take and kind of dive in a little bit, man.
Yeah, thanks. And if you're engaging with us, feel free to respond or say anything in the comments. Let us know how the last week's been for you, what's on your mind, what questions you might have about it, and it'd be fun to process that together. Yeah, it always works out that, not always, it often works out that I have some sort of vacation or time off planned, and then S hits a fan, like
that's right. Oh,
so and this wasn't unexpected. I think there was a lot of awareness of seeing this coming, but so I'll just share what was going on for me last Wednesday. We're in a heightened moment. There's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of heightened emotions, and especially around the election and what's going to happen next, especially because President Trump has said that he won in a landslide, and there's no proof of that. And so there's this question of like, what's going to happen when we come to the head where there has to be a transition of office. And this was held right on January 6th, which was supposed to be the day they'd certify the vote, and Trump and his people held like an actual rally outside to protest what they're going to vote. And so I'm already in like some text threads with people where I'm talking politics and sharing like, oh, did you hear what this person said or this lawyer or whatever. And it was also a day where I was just watching the kids. I had taken like better part of the last 2 weeks off work and was just home watching the kids. Allie was at work. And so I was watching it unfold and knowing that this was kind of a big day. Like, and what are these different elected officials going to do? Are they going to side with the president or are they not? And so I'm just kind of watching it, playing with kids and all that stuff, and starting to see it unfold, like, and getting text messages from people. And then I've learned, and I don't know if there's a healthy habit or not, but when there's like a significant event like this, you can see it in real time unfolding by going on Twitter or one of the streaming apps. And a lot of the people who are at demonstrations or protests, or for that matter, riots, will just have their phone and you can watch it in real time as if you're like standing there. Mm-hmm. And so I saw like right off the bat, like, okay, one, I'm speaking here. This is kind of a blurred line here because this is like an Oak Life official format, but I'm also an individual with my own perspectives and opinions. But I'm watching like some of the speeches and being like, come on, really? How do people buy this? And then I'm starting to watch what happens next. And I think if you've at all followed the news, I don't have to retell the story, but I started seeing people breaking in and hearing some of the things that people were saying into the Capitol. And I was like, oh man, this is a mess. And so we all know what happened. And it was like crazy. It was weird to watch especially after a summer and a year of so many demonstrations where the law enforcement came down hard against protests on behalf of Black lives, or and so forth. And so it was just so weird to watch. And watching President Trump get on and basically like say, hey, go home, but I love you, like, was just unbelievable. And for me, this clearly constitutes as inciting an insurrection. I would say sedition, which is an act against our government to be able to commit its duties, and even on the border of treason. And so that's never happened before, right? This in our country, this has happened once before, where somebody was able to come into the Capitol, break in this way. Maybe it happened before, but it hasn't happened in like 200 years or something, and just shocking. And so we're all kind of like head spinning, like what's happening? What does this mean? Seeing some of the rhetoric, seeing some of the religion that was used, like there's these banners of Trump and Jesus, and people are taking down the American flag and putting up a Confederate flag in the Capitol. And it seemed that some law enforcement were just letting it go by. And again, fueled by President Trump and his rhetoric. And some people can argue that point, but I would argue, and I think I'm right, because it's pretty clear. So there's so many questions. I'll finish my little opening thing. And again, Greg and I, we haven't like planned out a structure. We're just kind of processing together. So we're inviting us all to process together. And if you have comments or whatever, feel free to say what it was like for you, what emotions you're having or still having. I was so angry, like, oh my gosh, how are we letting this happen? I was so saddened. I was angry mostly because of the seems like these Christian fundamentalists worshiping at the altar of Trump and even starting a revolt surrounding their worship of that person and their following of that person. And then at the end of it all, I went to bed because it's life with 2 kids is exhausting. And at some point I woke up and checked my Twitter feed or whatever again and saw that Congress or the Senate had validated the votes. And even many Republicans spoke out against Trump, or at least against the revolt and the lies about the election. Since then, I think for me, the process has been seeing yet again how our country's divided, and we're seeing these things through our partisan lens and throwing different narratives out there to try to like justify our position or their position or whatever, which is again saddening. So just to tie it in a bow, I left and still feel very saddened, angry, confused, somewhat shocked, but also not shocked, and still on edge and anxious about what's going to happen this week and over the coming really 10 days, because impeachment might happen, various things might happen. So that's kind of how the experience, how it all was for me. And it is, how about for you? Like, how was it? Is it, you're less of a news junkie than I am, but it's everywhere, right? So how was it?
I liken it to a Scooby-Doo episode, right? You're going through all this chaos, all this commotion. You catch the villain, and you take off the mask, and it's like, I knew it was you. I'm surprised, but I'm also not surprised, right? So it's like you see this scenario. I was on the phone with my friend Brittany, Bespoke at the Poet, shout out, and it's interesting because she is currently, or was at the moment, in Georgia. And we're talking, and there was a very historical thing that happened in Georgia. Georgia turned blue, and I heard the celebration. And then and that was in the middle of, do you see what's happening at the Capitol? So it's like, even in opportunities where it's like, yo, we found a glimmer of like celebratory moment, it's like shattered because you have this chaos, this nonsense that's happening. And I feel as if the entire, and then again, this is just Greg, just regular old Gregory Ronald Stewart talking, like the whole Trump administration has just been a continual process of us seeing what is underneath this foundation that we call the United States of America. And in our own personal development, the foundation of our values and our truths and our beliefs and our understandings of life. And it's not pretty. The truth hurts. The truth is ugly, all that good stuff. And I think we're starting to see that more and more every day. So the nutshell, right, to wrap it in a bow, yes, I agree with you. It is completely saddening. It's completely infuriating at the same time. But for me, it's not news. It's just more of the same.
So I agree with you in that it's revealing stuff about ourselves. Like this whole thing, people say Trump isn't the issue; it's a symptom. Like the symptom of something underneath that. What are the things you're seeing over these last 4 years, or however, like that are bubbling up because of this political climate that we're in?
Mm-hmm. So, to me, the two things that stand out the most that are heightened is that there, without going too far into the conspiracies, right? It's obvious that people are being pitted against people, and whether that's red and blue, whether that's mask on, mask off, whether that's vaccinated, whether that's melanated or not, like we continuously this year, and it seems like it's continuing, is we're being pitted against each other for sure, to the point where America attacked America. Like, I don't know how much more pitted against yourself you can get, with other nations realizing, like, dude, they're losing it over there, right? So that's one thing. On the other side, it's that people are really, truly, truly fighting to protect what they think is right. Like, everyone's fighting to protect what they think is right. And to me, I agree with this idea that Trump is a symptom of a problem, not as much the problem. Yes, there are problems that come with the administration. I get that. But Trump didn't twist anybody's arm to raid the Capitol, you know? Also, the questions of how did people get into a government building that with such high importance without there being some like orchestrated underbelly happening? So, I mean, it does raise a lot of questions. But again, it's just like the obvious aspect is we are being pitted against one another, human against human, American against American. That's continuing to just overemphasize itself. And there's a lot happening that I think we don't know, that we can't see, that is not on Twitter, that is not in front of our face. And we should just be conscious that we don't have all the answers.
Yeah, that's good. I want to respond to some of your reflection there. And then I think that maybe the things that I feel like should be, I would love to process out loud, like are, what is the church's role? Mm-hmm. Like that's a conversation. This might be multiple roots and branches, and we'll see how long this goes. And then the second one, I think we need to talk about radicalization, like, and how that's happening and how to work through it, how to note it, how to like, because I'm seeing that. I think that to your first point of we're being pitted against each other, I think that's a huge part of that dynamic. Mm-hmm. So I kind of think it's a both and. I don't think the whole symptom or illness or symptom or disease. I do think you can't untangle those two, because
I agree.
So I would say that like it's a both and addressing both, like a president who uses racist rhetoric, who manipulates religion to stir a riot, to prey on people in the current moment that we're in, and put himself as like a demagogue or an idol. I think that is as much disease as it is symptom.
Did you just call Trump a demigod? That's hilarious.
Demagogue.
Demagogue.
Yeah. what's the thing from Demigorg? What was that show? Oh, come on.
You got me.
The Upside Down. If the kids, you didn't watch this show? I can't remember right now.
I shouldn't have derailed your conversation, bro. I'm sorry.
Somebody in the comments help us out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, I think it's a both and I think some of the factors are like pretty simple to like process through. Like we're in a disrupted moment. There's a lot of people who potentially feel disenfranchised. Trump creates an anxiety and then has the solution to Stranger Things. That's it. Duh. Thank you, Facebook user.
Bro. Also, my man, Julian Taylor. Trump seems to me to be the result of the symptom that the U.S. does not want to admit that it has.
Yeah.
So definitely the validity in the symptom idea, but I also very much agree that it's a both and conversation, because you have to deal with the symptom if you have it, but then you also have to deal with the root problem. So it's not an either or. It's definitely a both and.
Yeah, and maybe it's easier even for those of us who acknowledge the problem to scapegoat on an individual, like one person, and say, hey, if we just deal with this person, then we'll fix the problem. And it's got to be both. And maybe the harder work is getting at what's under the surface and the roots of it all. So anyways, lots to be frustrated about. And there's lots still unfolding. And again, we don't know what the next week or two is going to be like. But what do you think? A question to process there is, what is like the church's role? And I mean that both like morally, ethically, but also legally. Like, what? Any thoughts and responses? Like, even I've shared a few things on social media. I tend to stay out of a lot of stuff unless I feel like it bubbles up over a certain, like, okay, this is something that has to be, I want to make a public comment on. Usually it's just about the A's or something, but sometimes it's like, there's something I feel strongly about. How do we navigate that? Like, because we want to create a space where it's centered on Jesus and not a party. Yep. Jesus is, I think, nonpartisan, is for the human party. Yep. And but at the same time, Jesus calls out evil and injustice. And so how do we walk that balance, in your opinion? Solve it for us, Greg.
Okay, well, it's lucky that you asked me because I have the answer. No, I'm playing. But so what always comes to mind to me is this idea of us being the body, right? So you asked, what is our role? Okay. In a fighting analogy, if the role of the body is to defend itself and to avoid danger, right? That's the role of the body, okay? Then what is the role of the hand? What is the role of the knee? What is the role of the elbow? Like, these all change, right? So if the broad church, big C, right? If the role of the church is, the assistance in partnering with Jesus and ushering in this kingdom, then it's like, okay, well, what are the smaller roles for these sub churches, right? Little C. So you got like Oak Life Community, right? What is the role of Oak Life in regards to this? I think the first question, or the first answer to that question, is we have to take care of our people, not in opposition to other people, right? Like, because we haven't kind of open door, all are welcome, right? But how do we take care of our people first? And for me, if I have a problem, the first thing I want to do is approach the problem with a clear head, with a clear heart, and that's how I'm going to solve the issue, right? So if it's like there's a lot of crap happening out there, how do we make it so that our community can tackle the stuff out there? If we're beaten and worn and like full of questions and doubts, then how are we going to handle the stuff that's out there, right? So to me, that big question of how do we be the body? Well, first we take care of our people, and that looks different with each person so that we can go out and continue to do the work. That's the response that kind of comes to mind, but that's just Gregory.
Yeah, it's good. I like the dynamic. I like what you said about having a clear mind. Like, that's one thing. A lot of us in these conversations are immediately activated, and that's something to note. Like, and often there's a good reason for that. Mm-hmm. But to process through these things in the long haul in a way that's transformative requires a step back and to note and acknowledge and take inventory and think through how to act accordingly. I do think that the reactivity of our culture, both on the right and the left, is a danger. Like, because it's easy to dehumanize and make somebody else the villain. And I'm always like reminded of amongst Jesus' disciples, he had people who were zealots and tax collectors following him. Some who were as anti-empire as you can imagine, to the point that they were like potentially like seen as rebels against Rome. And then on the same time, people who worked for Rome and took taxes on behalf of Rome. And that's so hard. So how do you create space for, as a church, where people from all these perspectives can unify on Jesus? I think our world needs that. I think that's like something that's missing altogether in our conversation, and very antithetical to what you said earlier, that we're being divided. Mm-hmm. That said, there has to be a common like sense of safety and shared social contract. Like, so if if you think that, if you're actually, so say you're racist and you're actually acting out on that and hurting people, like that doesn't have a space in a community, a church community. And this person is loved by God and all those things, but that needs to be worked through and called out towards repentance. So I think that the boundary, the tension is how to hold space for everybody to receive grace, but not allow space for vitriol, violence, hatred. And so if there's tension there, because it'll be messy. And there's even a chance where certain communities will skew certain ways based on what you said, who our people are. So yeah, there's a couple comments, and I had to look up to see who this was, so I know who it is. I don't know if you did or not.
Well, I didn't look it up, but I feel like the question posed, they like corrected. You already said something in a comment. I'm assuming this individual is referring to you on one of your posts that kind of was to the effect of Christianity actually is political. You even said like everything is political, I think, but then said never mind, that wasn't it. So I'm not sure what.
I don't disagree with that comment. I think that's where we want to parse out like politics from spirituality, and you can't, like, just as everything is spiritual, like everything you do, everything is political. It's like there isn't a binary, it's a entanglement. And so yeah, a lot of churches, a lot of American Christians have this thing in their head that like pastors, churches aren't political. And the truth couldn't be further from that, both historically and currently. And that's both good and bad. There's been times where the church has really used religion to advance their political gains. But there's also the reality that like from the prophets calling out corrupt leaders and governments to the language of the New Testament being Jesus is Lord, which is a very political statement, to Jesus himself speaking out on behalf of those in the vulnerable. Christianity is absolutely a political thing. The just so people know, so that people are like, there's some clarity. Where in our country the messiness gets is an IRS code, which is like how churches can maintain a tax status. Anyone can say what they want to say as long as it's not violent or those sorts of things. But to be a church under IRS code, we can't endorse candidates specifically, or we can't become a political platform. So you can't create like the church of Chris Scott running for office. And I can't, and we can't say, vote for this person exclusively. This is what it means to be a Christian, to vote X or Y. What we can say, and what churches are protected to be able to do, is speak out on behalf of values and against values. And if that means, in my opinion, I'm not a legal expert in this, but I think we're allowed to speak out against candidates or politicians who are going against the values of our faith. I will always hold space for people who disagree with me, and I will like try my best to love them, and I will have as much empathy as I can, and I'll hear them out. But we have that freedom, technically. In Oak Life, we're both very political and not political. I know I already said that separation doesn't exist, but explicitly, like there are times where we'll make statements, but a lot of what we do is just in the systemic makeup of who we are. Like we're inclusive church. We don't like say everybody has to be this way or whatever, but just who we are functions that way. We care about combating racism, all that stuff. And it comes up, we care about a preferential treatment of the marginalized and the poor. And then that plays out to how we vote and live in the world. But yeah, I'm kind of riffing out. I'm sorry. I'm talking a lot, but what I'll close with, which might bring up more questions, is what broke my heart among many things, but especially there's special sensitivity to, was seeing the flags of Jesus and Trump and the American, seeing actual violence happening in Jesus's name for a particular political party. And how have we not learned that lesson over history? So that's what really, there's many things that got me angry, but that's one of the things.
What are we to do with this anger? That's a question that comes to mind, because I think for a lot of history, anger has got this bad rap that, oh, Christians can't be angry, right? And then people, take it however they want to take it. But there is some like valid reason to be angry. Case in point, you just mentioned it. You see the name of Jesus being like held not only in vain but tarnished, and it's just like there's so many reasons why that's upsetting. Like, what do we do with this anger and this tension? Because if we're just told, hey, don't be angry, you must love, and love doesn't have space for anger, when actually I think it does, kind of depends on the scenario. But it's like suppression is always the answer, and I don't think that's the answer. I think it's quite the opposite of that. So like, as a nugget for a takeaway from our Oak Life Familia, like, what are some, and I don't want to make this sound self-helpy, but like, what do we do with this anger? You know what I mean? I have thoughts, but I'm curious on yours.
Yeah. Well, I think there's healthy anger and unhealthy anger, or righteous anger and unrighteous anger. And it's somewhat subjective, right? Like, it might look differently for different people, but I think what we know it when we see it, when it's unhealthy, when you're harming others, when you're defacing the image of God in other people, when it leads to violence or self-harm, I think it's clearly like, this is anger that's not helpful or healthy. We know that, like, I believe God wants us to experience shalom in our life, meaning like wholeness and health. That doesn't mean things to be cozy and happy and prosperous all the time, but like to have some peace. And so when it's not those things, and this goes into Paul's analogy of fruit, like if the fruit is bad, if the fruit is division and violence and hatred, it's clearly not the right channel for anger. And if it's on the flip side, if it's anger that fuels your work for those in need, if it's anger that fuels your work to self-improve a bad habit, if it's anger that allows you to speak out on something you haven't spoken out before, I think that's healthy anger. So it's about channeling it. And it's much harder to channel it towards healthy things. It's so much easier to just punch a wall.
Oh man, I've got scars to prove that point valid. Oh man. Yeah, buddy.
Yeah. And that's where I think the reactive thing is. Like, the anger we're seeing is shallow, reactive anger. And it's not anger and love. It's anger out of insecurity, out of anxiety, out of fear. And this is where the next point I wanted to process through is radicalization. People are angry, right? And so people take advantage of that. That's the fundamentals. We were talking about this beforehand. I was saying, like, look, this isn't new. The moves that leaders have to divide and conquer us, it's the same basic playbook. People are feeling anxious, marginalized, whether it's justified or not. And all you got to do is say, these are the people who you should be angry at, and I'm the one who's going to fix it for you. And it's the basic playbook, but it works every time. And I see it on the right and the left. Like, right now, I think there's a big difference in the right and the left activism. I've seen a lot of false equivalencies online right now where people are saying, well, what about Black Lives Matter protests that ended up in violence? There's a huge difference because the person who incited the violence has the nuclear codes and holds the office of the most powerful person on the planet. And so there's a giant power dynamic difference between the violence that was inspired directly from Trump's rhetoric and the lies of the election and so forth, and the violence that came out of the anger of a community that's been marginalized for hundreds of years. And what's incorrect on the talk points on the right, that Antifa somehow was involved in the protests in DC, which is just, like, as of right now, factually not correct. That actually happened on the left, where more radical groups came in, and this is my opinion, they hijacked Black pain for their own political purpose. And that's not okay. And people will be like, well, why haven't you called that out? It's like, well, I of course, that's not okay. But then the reason this bubbles up to, like, for me, a point where, like, this is different. It's because the person's got the damn nuclear codes and has a bullhorn and a platform like nobody in our world. So sorry, I kind of went off. I haven't used the word.
I love it.
I used the D word.
I'm gonna be straight up with you, Chris. I like seeing you on fire for everything. I don't care what it is. When you turn up, I'm happy. I get excited. So feel free, bro.
Hopefully it's not unhealthy turn up.
No, man. It's usually about politics or the A's. Like usually it. And so it's pretty healthy in my opinion. You're good.
All right, here's a question. We were talking about this a little bit beforehand.
Okay.
Radicalization. People being pushed to more extreme positions.
Okay.
Or down the conspiracy theory rabbit trail. Why do you think that's happening right now so much? And how do you fix that, Greg?
This is how you fix that. Okay. So here you go. And it kind of goes back to the answer of what's the role of the church. I think that there's a difference between responding and reacting. Our human tendency in life is to react. If, for example, I'm gonna go on a minor rabbit trail tangent to make this point. Okay. You get thrown in the water, right? Your body is going to react. Okay. Now, if you are taught how to respond, then you will swim, you will do well. If you panic, you will sink. Next scenario, you're in a fight, right? If you don't know what to do, you are not trained, you will probably leave your chin open, you will probably close your eyes, and you'll probably get knocked out or worse. If you are trained how to respond, you'll do okay. Okay. So hopefully you're picking up what I'm putting down here. In life, bad things happen. You cannot train to respond to all bad things externally, but there's a lot of there's a lot of similarity in the patterns that happen on our inside, right? With our heart, with our mind, when the bad things happen, depending, whatever they could be. The inward circumstances, they have a lot of similarity. So if we have a space, and this is what I think the church's job is, if we have a space in which we can practice how we respond here first, we get used to these patterns when things happen out in the world, then we have conditioned ourselves to respond. And that's what the church is supposed to do. Be a place for people to practice this, and then also be an example on how to respond. I don't think we should ever just react. I think reaction in and of itself, there's too much room for more bad stuff, just more perpetuation of the problem. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
That's good. Yeah, and if you study trauma and like the fight or flight mechanism, like noticing how, because those things are going to happen. There's going to be moments where I'm activated, like I'm going to get worked up, and that's the most normal human thing in the world, right? Like you said, bad things are going to happen. So training yourself to note that, to be aware of it, so that those forces that don't want to prey on that to get your vote or your money or whatever, they won't. You'll be able to see through it. And so to your point, the analogy of the fight, if you've never trained or prepared for this thing, use the metaphor of getting hit, if there wasn't some sort of preparation for that, and there's no support network, and there's voices that are telling you, hey, come over here and we're going to find the enemy. Like, it's so easy to get drawn into that. So you get kicked down, you're on the ground, something happens that just challenges you. When there are those voices that are saying like, this person's the bad guy, these people are the bad guys, I will fix it for you. Like those, we need to train ourselves, not just in the, hey, how are things going to happen? Like, what am I going to do? But when they do, who's going to try to take advantage of me?
Yeah.
And how do I have guards against that? I think some of that's being in healthy community. Mm-hmm. I think anytime where there's too much power given to anybody in your life, there's a chance for it to be manipulated. Mm-hmm. And so having like lots of voices being able to speak into you and process things together. But it's cult like practice, like, right. We find people who are vulnerable, who have been through something hard. We become their answer. And then we ask for their blind allegiance.
Yep.
So what's the difference between that and religion? Like,
that's great. I was just thinking about it. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. This might not be your question. I just wanted to say something, and then let me clarify your question. But everything that we're talking about is like natural stuff, right? Things naturally happen, good, bad, and different. The church is supposed to do X, Y, and Z, like responding, shelter, all that good stuff, right? But that's all the natural stuff. The beauty about everything that you're saying with what happens to the voices that are going to manipulate people who are wounded and who are vulnerable, right? The beauty is that the teachings of Jesus pretty much cover all of those, like patternistic, that's not a word, I don't know, but all of those things that we're kind of covering. And that's just all in the natural aspect of things, right? Like there's very clear instruction in scripture that can help us with this. But then there's also that supernatural aspect where things will happen that you just can't explain. You can't train for. And I'm sure, I know you have stories, I have stories. And the more we share stories in the community, you're like, dang, dude, God really had our back on this one. And there was nothing I could have done in preparation. So it's like, on one hand, you have this natural way to learn how to be safe in these situations, or safer in these situations, maybe not always safe. But then on the other hand, then you have that like, you can't speak it because it's like, yo, that's beyond words type aspect to these things. So in your question, what's the difference between what we're talking about in religion? Do you mean religion in the organized form of it, or religion in the like faith form of it?
I mean, yeah, I like what you said, by the way. I think the question of it's an easy critique to say religion does that. Like, here, follow this person and do these things. And does that make sense? So what's different? Like,
not to sound like a broken record, but if I'm hearing you right, it's the answer to the question, what separates religion from a Trump figure manipulating on the weak, right? It's relationship. And what I mean by that is that I had a friend who wasn't a sports fan. I'm not a sports fan, but they were talking to someone who's a sports fan. And they were like, why do you follow, let's say, I won't say anything about the A's. Why do you follow the Golden State Warriors? Why?
Hey, now,
what?
They're playing well right now. I don't.
Why do you follow the Raiders? Why are you a Raider? Dang. Let me see. Kansas City Chiefs. Why are you a Kansas City Chiefs fan? Right. Hopefully, I'm not offending any Kansas City Chiefs fan for any of the four we're watching. But it's like they've never done anything for you. You rock their jersey. You're willing to fight. They don't know who you are, but you still follow them, right? And I think that for the church, for religion, this, hey, come follow Jesus, doesn't just mean, hey, subscribe to my channel, I'm never going to know or talk to you. It's more of a, hey, come do this thing with me. I will be a part of your life. You will be a part of my life. We will be in community together, and all of the messy work that comes with that, I am committing to in this request to invite you on this journey. Whereas like a political figure or anything like that, they throw out those claims, but they're all empty. And I think that's what the difference should be. Now, has religion been used to manipulate people? Has it been empty promises? Yes, of course. Because, humans can be weird sometimes. But I think it's that relational aspect that comes with the invitation that sets religion apart, that should set religion apart from those other things.
Yeah, I like that. I would just add relationship out of love. Like that, it's because you can have relationships that are exploitative or abusive or whatever, but it's a relationship on the path of love, which, in our tradition looks like Jesus. And so again, love is also kind of a more abstract thing, but the fruit is obvious. It's like, this is not bringing me that way. And this one is, it's making me more compassionate, giving me more peace. And so pretty sure Julian Taylor's Kent, by the way. I could be wrong, but I think.
No. I know Julian Taylor. That's my homie from back in the day.
Oh, nice.
Like, that's Broham. That's Brody. We were young Padawans together in this journey of faith.
That's what's up.
Yeah.
Well, the faith versus construct thing, and I think, again, we were just processing out loud, so don't we're not like, but I wonder if at the end of the day, if it's bringing you towards the path of love and it's not hurting you and there's somebody not corrupting you, and you can always tell because it's power and money. This person wants your money or they want to control your life. Be cautious, be very cautious there. Mm-hmm. And if they have the answers and they're making themselves a savior, all those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. But I think ultimately faith is something that's hard to describe because it's a connection to the divine, which is beyond words. Mm-hmm. And so I can't tell you emphatically, scientifically, this is why I believe what I believe. And here it is, here's what I believe. It's more like the way I look at my kids. It's something deeper. It's I think the word supernatural, super rational. It's beyond just rationale. But this is where there's tension, because part of the reason so many people of faith get swept up into conspiracies is because we've opened this door to hey, you don't have to believe in science. We have all the answers over here based on these traditions that are a few thousand years old. And so we give people permission to turn off their rational minds and just follow spiritual leaders.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's safe either. I think we should be people of faith who think super critically in community around the path of love.
And open to the both and. So to Julian's comment, the faith and the construct, you can't separate them. Love everyone. That includes the individuals who are using Jesus's name for violence. They're part of that everyone. How we love them may look different, but the rational mind, the science and the faith, they're not separate. And I think for so long, humans' instinctual need to make things easier by separating things and categorizing them. Yes, there's some use for it as far as study and analysis, but you can't leave things separated. Physical analogy, if I cut my arm off here and put it back, it'll heal. I'll have access to it again. If I keep it separate, it won't. And too often we try to divide things and just leave them divided. And it's that's not going to help. So you can't have one without having the other, unfortunately. And learning how to live well in the both and being open to, okay, there's more to this story. That's going to be needed more than ever in the coming days. For real.
Yeah, how to have Jesus love for the people who, like you said, were waving the Jesus flag alongside the Confederate flag. And I do think that there's a place for boundaries in love, meaning it is the most loving thing to do to offer correction and structure or discipline. And I think, legal ramifications are a form of discipline and self-correction. So I think if somebody's acting like a terrorist, probably the most loving thing to do is put them in jail, both for them and for others. And then that's theoretical, right? I guess not theoretical. It's real. But person to person, interpersonal, it's different because each of us individually isn't responsible for the legal structures above us day to day. So if I come across somebody who I vehemently disagree with, who I think has acted out of a place of hatred, how do I respond to them like Jesus would? I think that's kind of the first question, right? And it's messy because I know people in our community who are that's so hard for me because I've been hurt. I need it. And I would say that the most loving thing to do would be to put a boundary up. And if you don't have the bandwidth, let the rest of the body help and hold that.
Yeah, that's good.
But yeah, it's going to be interesting times. And I hope it doesn't get worse. Praying it doesn't get worse. I think we need some grace and love and also accountability. And unfortunately, until there's an acknowledgement of legitimate wrong, the space for grace to work is a lot harder. I think grace is always there, but it's almost not let in. So until there's hey, we've messed up, then it's grace can be let into that environment. And I think I don't see I see some people saying, hey, that was wrong. I voted for this person and I see how this is wrong now. And I condemn these actions, but
Yeah,
Well-
I don't hear a lot of that going on.
Some. Well, it doesn't catch the headlines. So this goes back to the point of radicalization. Like the real structures in society that are pushing us towards hating each other so much. It's the media, it's online, it's politics, it's all those things, social media, and those spaces. There's no utility to a long conversation about grace. It's F you, you suck, whatever. So, yeah. All right. Well, I don't feel like we solved anything. This was like a.
I solved it all, bro. I had the answer. I'm ready.
How long have we gone? Usually
45 minutes.
Oh yeah, we need to cut this. This is way too long.
Another thought, just a closing thought that I think could help, depending on how you take this. But there was a gentleman who was a leader of a nonprofit organization. I'm blanking on his name, but he was saying when we first started out, we want to change the world, and our aspirations were, as big as they could be. And the more time I spent in this line of work, I realized that in order to change the world, you just have to change the world for some, right? Like there is so many missed opportunities that are right in front of us when our eyes and our attention is focused on all of the big problems that are real in the world. It's like the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. The first step to a 1,000-step journey is that the one in front of you, right? Like, how can we use this as motivation to pay attention to what's right here? And I think that is going to get us way further than we give it credit.
That's good.
Yeah, man. So
I like that. I have one last takeaway too. So if your takeaway is change the world here, start here, like whatever your own life or a couple of people around you, how do you walk the path of love there? I'll say even maybe more specifically with your tongue, like using James's language. Words matter. Like I think that's we've part of the radicalization thing is we got desensitized to how powerful words are and how violent rhetoric, how even language that's unnecessarily harsh or crude out of even satire has risk. Like there's a responsibility to our words that actually the ripple effect will be people's actions. Yep. Yeah. So that goes back to, that's a critique of the demonstrations on both the far right and the far left. Like sometimes the rhetoric goes too far. It's not out of love. It's out of.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. And with all takeaways combined, we are Captain Jesus. But yeah, that's it. We're losing followers, man. They're done.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us and processing. We're in this journey together. There's probably more to come.
Yep. Julian, appreciate you, fam.
Yeah, sorry, I thought you were somebody else.
It's all good, man. It's all good. You're forgiven. You are forgiven, Chris. Anyway, that's it. That's our time. Keep the conversations going. If you're watching this later, add to the comment section. We want to keep this as communal and as engaging and as family-oriented as possible. And with that, peace out.
Talk to him. That's it. That's it. That's it.